Come on in. Welcome to Idled Out, where we talk all things Survivor. My name is Luke, and today we're looking at the Survivor seasons with the worst boot orders. Last week, we looked at Survivor's best boot orders, seasons where the interesting, fun, dynamic players went deep. Today, time to look at the opposite. This is obviously subjective, but for me, a bad boot order sees a lot of strategic movers and shakers leave the game early, with passive and less engaging players going far. Maybe there's a really boring post-merge pagonging that stops the season's momentum dead in its tracks. Perhaps all the big, fun personalities are taken out before their time, and the less engaging characters are left. Sometimes the opposite happens, as obnoxious characters go too far and their shtick gets worn thin. Philip in Caramoan in 10th place? Love it. Philip in Redemption Island in the final 3? May the Lord take me now. And then, of course, there's the returnee factor, whereby Survivor returnee seasons are seemingly cursed to always have the big names leave early, with the second string players left at the merge. Yeah, we'll be talking about more than one returning player season here. Overall, if you envision the ideal way the season could go down on paper, how far are we away from that? That's a bad boot order. There are a lot of ways it can happen, but you know it when you see it. So vote out all the winners, pagong the more interesting tribe, and sleep your way to the final 6 as we talk about the worst boot orders in Survivor history. At number 5 is Survivor's original disappointing boot order, Survivor All-Stars. This is the Phantom Menace of Survivor. So hype beforehand, and so disappointing after. Hey, it's even got its own Jar Jar. With about 20 years distance, I think fan opinion has risen on this season considerably, considering Rob and Amber's legacy. But heading into this, a pre-merge consisting of every winner, Jerry, Colby, Sue, Rob C, and Rudy, and a final 3 of Amber, Boston Rob, and Jenna was a genuinely unfathomable national emergency. We're at least a code orange on the terrorism alert level here. Sir, another winner's been voted out of Survivor All-Stars. I knew we were in trouble the second we set foot on Chapera, and Boston Rob was our narrator. To understand this, you gotta put on some skinny jeans and layer some tank tops and try to put yourself back in 2004. Boston Rob and Amber were not yet Survivor royalty. The faces of Survivor were Richard Hatch, Colby, Jerry, and newly Rupert. These were the players we wanted to see go far at the time, not the 13th most interesting character in Survivor Australia. Hey, at least you're ahead of Nick. And every single week, a legend left the game, leaving us with an endgame largely composed of the more second-rate players heading into the season. Many of them contend to just passively third-wheel it with Rob and Amber. To add on to that, the way people went out felt mean-spirited. Survivor's supposed to be fun, but because of the close-knit nature of the Survivor community at the time, betrayals this season were the most brutal and personal they ever were or ever will be. So the season just has a dark, nasty tone to it. However, this season did make new Survivor legends. Romber ascended to Survivor royalty, Sheehan's stock went way up, Ethan outlasted his expiration date by quite a while, and Rupert stayed relatively beloved. I mean, he did do what everyone in America wanted to do at the time, which is try to drown Jerry. On the other hand, everyone else came out of this season looking various shades of bad, petty, or hypocritical. Or in the case of Lex, all three. At number 4 is Survivor Worlds Apart. With this cast, this season was always destined to be kinda mean-spirited. But the players who made it far were the unfun kinda mean, and the players who all went out early were the fun kinda mean. The pre-mergers, by and large, were players with potential either as characters, fun villains, or both. So, Vince and Joaquin in particular are all devastating losses to the season's entertainment value, with So and Joaquin really embodying the sleazy corporate side of White Collar, and Vince is like the only person on No Collar who truly even embodies that tribe's theme, which I interpret as looks smelly. Then, of course, there's Max, a proto-survivor dork archetype, a literal California liberal arts professor who could not embody smugness more. Perfect White Collar tribe casting. All of these players would have been fun post-mergers or endgamers, and instead we got this. Will, Rodney, and Dan, who all brought out the worst in each other. I mean, Rodney really took the piss out of these guys. I'm talking literally. Individually, I think they'd all be fun post-merge antagonists, particularly Dan, but all three together, ugh. Throw in a pagonging of the more likable alliance in the early post-merge, and an endgame immunity run seen a mile away, and you have a season that just really failed to live up to its potential. That's not casting's fault. I think this is actually a pretty good cast. It's like the last gasp of Survivor's mean era before they pivoted away from super toxic personalities in the early 30s. But it shook out in about the most frustrating way possible. I know this season has its defenders as a dark comedy, but I've personally never really gotten it. But hey, if you love a bitter taste in your mouth, you're in luck. At number 3 is Survivor Ghost Island. You gotta wonder what happened in casting with this season. This seems like a bad Big Brother cast, not a Survivor cast. But mediocre casts have made good seasons. But not this one. It is well and truly sank by its boot order. Few seasons are as frustrating to watch as this one. Why? Say the line, Kellen.
Navidi is still ahead in the numbers. And that's how I'll get to the end of the game, by saying Navidi's strong.
Malolo's constant decimation at the hands of Navidi is just depressing. They lose the first 2 immunity challenges, and then they suffer 2 incredibly unfortunate swaps. James, Stephanie, and Brendan are all voted out pre-merge precisely because they were the strategic thinkers on Malolo, the only ones who threatened Navidi's chokehold on the game. I know Bradley also went out early, and he was one of the biggest champions of Navidi Strong, but at least he was funny. Basically, every pre-merger had potential either as someone who could shake up the game strategically, or was a fun character. Then we get to the post-merge. The season's only real villain, Chris, is unanimously voted out immediately, sinking the season's entertainment factor and leaving us with no one to really root against. Ugh, it's so funny this guy is the main bad guy of this season. He's a white rapper. Is there literally anything less threatening than that? After Chris, the few Malolos left, and anyone who dares to not drink the Navidi Kool-Aid is quickly clipped, leaving us with an endgame of, quite literally, the 3 most passive players to ever play this game, and Wendell and Dom to run strategic circles all around them. Laurel teasing a flip on Wendell and Dom, then refusing to follow through every single week, can only be described in a single image. Maybe this one's particularly on the edit. Because of their unprecedented tie at the end, the edit really focused in on Wendell and Dom's relationship at the expense of other post-merge players. But I don't know. I don't think Angela, Seabass, and Laurel really gave them much to work with. And all of them left at the final 6 to sleepwalk through the finale just makes this endgame a predictable slog, even if the final tribal tie sends the season out on a high note. At number 2 is Survivor Winners at War. I still enjoy this season a lot, but there's no denying that on paper, this is a nearly worst case scenario boot order. We're lucky Tony clinched this one out, because the pre-merge slaughter of every single player who debuted pre-Heroes vs. Villains is a brutal start to this season. These were the players fans were waiting to see play. Some hadn't played in nearly 20 years, and they're just voted out one by one right as the season begins. Parvati, Sandra, Boston Rob, Tyson, Ethan, and Yule is a genuine worst-case scenario pre-merge. And Amber and Danny going early is also horrible, in principle. This season's casting was always going to lean in on the more recent winners from the 30s. That's just how these things go. But that all of them made the merge and most of them went deep at the expense of the old school legends makes for a frustrating watch. Edge of Extinction kinda blunts the pain of losing so many iconic players early by keeping them on our screen until the finale, which is honestly the only reason this isn't in the #1 spot. You gotta love it. CBS was like, if we're paying the Marianos to be out here, we're wringing 14 episodes out of them, no matter how early they go. With a cast this stacked, the boot order simply cannot be all bad, of course. Tony and Sarah making Final Four together was a great and emotional conclusion to their 3-season arc. I'll always take more Jeremy. Sophie completely rewrote her legacy. Seeing a slightly rusty Kim having to play defensively for once was a fun twist. And Adam somehow became the messiest and thus most entertaining player of the season. Again, I still like this season, despite the brutal boot order. It still genuinely feels like a celebration of 20 years of Survivor start to finish. But the season is definitely boosted by Tony's win. Now, on the other side of the Tony coin, the most disappointing boot order of all time is Survivor Game Changers. You knew it would be here. This is what happens when we rely too heavily on returnees, and why I'm glad Survivor's showing some restraint and holding off on returnees until 50. It's a point that's been beaten to death, and I'm here to dig it up and beat it to death again. Game Changers? The Game Changers cast was composed of about 10 or so legitimate actual game changers, and 10 or so alleged game changers. Had there been just 1 or 2 of these WTF picks, some of them would have been fun Wentworth-esque wrenches thrown into the cast. But half of them? As is to be expected, most of the big names went pre-merge. Tony, Sandra, JT, Malcolm, and Sierra all go early, and the only really big names to make the merge are Cirie, Aubrey, Ozzy, and sure, I'll give you Andrea. But only Cirie really ends up having that much impact in the game. With such a top-heavy cast, this season was always going to shake out this way. Players on returnee seasons are even more petrified than usual of going early. The not as popular players are very invested in improving their legacy, and there are big, juicy targets sitting right there, though some made it easier than others.
Hey, you guys do nice. I'm out. I'm looking for the idol. Where's he going? He said I'm out. I'm looking for the idol.
This really comes down to a casting and theming problem. They just jumped the gun after the success of Second Chance, and the lofty theme didn't help smooth over some of these bizarre choices. Like, okay, Sierra was an alternate, sure, but we already voted against Brad and Troyzan's return. The people spoke, and we said no. Democracy truly does not work. Jeff Varner? All he did to change the game was fail to make the jury after 3 tries. Caleb was medevaced on day 9 his first time, but I guess the show kinda locked themselves into bringing him back. That episode even ends with an ominous threat of his return. Oh, that's okay. I'm good. Haley herself was like, why the fuck am I here?
I don't know why I'm back. I think I played a horrible game my first time around.
I don't hate this season, but it is easily my least favorite all-returnee season by a lot because of the disappointing but inevitable boot order. I think if this were all newbies and it played out exactly the same way, it's not so bad. There's definitely some fun strategy and character stuff post-merge, I'll give it that. The pre-merge is genuinely fun. I wonder if that's because all the fun characters are still in the game. But as it is, it's hard to ignore so many of the actual game changers leaving the game so soon, disappearing to Ponderosa faster than Tony disappeared into the woods. Got nothing else for you. If this video made you feel Navidi strong, like and subscribe, and I'll get you more Survivor content just like this. Until next time, don't get idled out.